Have you ever tried to hang something like a floating shelf in a wall only to find out too late that the studs aren't where you need them to be? We're going to show you how to hang things in drywall using anchors and help you decide which anchors you should use, and maybe more importantly, how to use those anchors properly. All that and more. Not that much more. Pretty concise, but some more coming right now. Today's video tutorial is proudly sponsored by RONA, your trusted destination for everything home improvement. Whether you're a homeowner tackling weekend projects, a DIY enthusiast looking to level up your skills, or a seasoned professional needing reliable products and expert support, RONA has you covered every step of the way. So let's get to it. So anytime that you're hanging anything heavy or anything of significance on a wall, anything that you don't want to come down, it's a good idea to make sure that you get some form of structure into a stud. So behind every sheet of drywall, a wall is built up of studs, and they're usually every 16 inches or so. But you don't really know where they are just looking at it. So it's a good idea before you start anything to figure out where your studs are before you hang anything. So to find our studs, we grab a stud finder. Most people have these kicking around. But what you want to do is just take note of where your studs are. So for in this wall, we know we have a stud here, and about 16 inches, we'll have one here. So on our demonstration board, I'm gonna mark those out with some green tape so that we know where they are. So what if we wanna hang something in the center of our demonstration wall, but the thing itself that we're hanging isn't long enough to reach either of these two studs here? Well, if the thing is big enough, like say it's a big TV or a big heavy picture that needs to be anchored in something structural, what you could do is cut a piece of scrap wood, like a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, mount that to your studs, and then when you're attaching your bracket, you can attach it anywhere on this. It can be off center. As long as it's in that wood, it'll be tied into the studs. So that's a great way to do that if whatever you're hanging is bigger than the backing. But that's not always the case. Okay, so let's say for example, I wanted to hang this shelf and I wanted it to be center on our demonstration wall. This is the bracket that comes with this shelf. Most floating shelves have a bracket system similar to this one. But as you can see, if I wanted this shelf to be centered and I go to hang this bracket, what you'll see pretty quickly is that it doesn't reach either stud. So this is gonna be floating, it's gonna be anchored in just the drywall. So how do we make sure that this shelf or anything else that we're hanging is gonna be nice and strong? It's gonna stay on the wall. We're gonna rely on what's known as a hollow wall anchor, which is basically designed to help you mount things on just drywall itself. And there's a million different kinds, and there's a few different things you should think about when you're choosing your anchor. And in order to help you make a better decision, I'm gonna explain a little bit about a few of the basic anchor types. And they're right up here. And now so am I. Now the first thing you should know when it comes to choosing a hollow wall anchor is that almost every pack of anchors will list the weight that it supports on the package. So that's a really easy way to start off and sort of figure out what ballpark you're in. But beyond that, there's sort of three basic categories of anchors. There's the light category. These are basically plugs or self-screwing anchors that basically support things by expanding slightly when you put a screw in. So they're good for holding small things, but not so great for holding heavy things. Next, we have the medium category. So this is where we start to get into anchors that have some form of expanding arms or legs. Basically, when you screw them in, there's a component in the anchor that expands wider than the anchor to give it some additional holding power. So in this category, this is great for hanging sort of heavy stationary things like floating shelves, things that are heavy but not super heavy and maybe don't have any pulling action. So things that aren't getting moved or aren't supporting too much weight. This is a great option for that. But if you're looking to go really heavy, you want some real structural support, then we go into this category. So this is the heavy duty wall anchor system. These anchors work by basically creating a bracket system on the back of the drywall. So when I screw these through the wall, there's a bracket that's gonna turn, and when I insert the screw or the bolt, it's gonna wedge itself against that bracket and form a really strong bond. These are the things you're gonna want whenever you're looking for maximum strength. Why don't I show you on our demonstration wall how we install these anchors and some of the pros and cons of a few of these common anchors. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna install is one of these common sort of cheap plastic plugs. Now these are very basic. You've probably seen these a million times. You may have actually even seen these ripped out of your wall because they don't tend to hold very much. Why don't we install these, and I'll show you why they might not be the best idea to hang stuff. Okay, so as you can see with that plug, the only thing that's holding that in the wall is those tiny little plastic legs that haven't really expanded a whole lot. So let's do the next level up, which is the self-drilling anchor. These guys you don't even technically need to drill a pilot hole for. They screw right into the wall, and they do basically the same thing as this plug with slightly bigger legs or arms. These are great for light loads, things like small pictures or basically static loads, things that aren't heavy and aren't moving. So there's not a lot of force being applied to these. You know, things like pictures, YouTube plaques, these are great for things like that. It would be heavier if we had more followers probably. So help us out. So yeah, these are okay if you're not hanging a lot, but they have some pretty obvious flaws as well. The first and most obvious being that they can't support a lot of weight. They rip out of the wall pretty easily. And with the self-screwing ones, if you over tighten that, if you're bringing that screw in and out several times, or if you over screw this anchor as you're installing it, it can rip through the drywall, and then you're left with a big hole and the anchor is pretty much useless. And with these plugs specifically, I'm going to show you how easy it is to pull that out of the wall with very little force, just using the back of my hammer here. This would be your TV on the floor. Don't hang anything heavy or important with these, ever. So now we're moving on to the anchors that can hold a little bit more weight, the medium category. These are the anchors that have a secondary component that sort of spreads out and holds the weight from behind the drywall. So I'm gonna install two different kinds of these, and I'll show you how it's not just about knowing the anchor, it's knowing how to install it. So these are called drive anchors, or sometimes called molly anchors, and these ones work once they're inserted into the drywall. The screw goes in and it pulls these metal components so that this part compresses and it forms almost like an octopus. Why am I telling you? Why don't I just show you what it looks like? So those are the drive anchors. Now in the medium category, we have the self-drilling anchor again, only this time, these ones have a special technology. These little blue sections, as you put a screw into them, they expand. It's almost like their legs are, their arms are spreading. Basically, they have little wings that stick out and grab the drywall from the back. So these ones, it's important to know that if you over tighten one of these that doesn't have this technology, you can really screw it up. But for this one, you kind of have to. You have to do 3 or 4 extra turns to make sure that you're activating these legs. And now it's time to talk about the big dogs, the heavy load lifting anchors. These are the ones that we use most of the time because why not go bigger? Why not go stronger? Why not make sure that what you're hanging is going to stay up there? So I'm going to install a few of these heavy duty wall anchors, and let's go. So first up in the heavy duty category, we've got sort of a hybrid. So this is a self-drilling toggle bolt. So these ones work, you don't need to pre-drill, they drill themselves into the wall, but then when you insert the screw or the bolt, it pushes this like this and then snugs it up against the drywall like that. That's a really high-tech way of explaining how these work. So our next up in the heavy hitters is the flip toggle. These are sort of our go-to when it comes to hanging stuff, just because they carry a huge weight maximum limit, and we find that you're better off going big, or going home, as they say. So to install these flip toggle style anchors, the first thing you do is you drill a hole through the wall. This one calls for a 1/2 inch, but again, check your anchors specifically to make sure. Then what you do is you turn this portion of the anchor so that it aligns with the body. Slide that through your hole. That sounds wild. Slide that through the drywall. Then there's a collar that gets snugged up to the front of the drywall. Once that's done, we snap off the excess, throw a bolt through there. The bolt turns this face like this. It all gets snugged up and grabs the drywall. Okay, now that I've explained a whole lot about hollow wall anchors and I've shown you how a number of them install and work, it's time to help you figure out how you can select the right anchor for your project. Now, obviously I don't know what your project is, but I'll show you how I would select an anchor for the project that we're gonna do, which is hanging a floating shelf. I've got the bracket for that floating shelf here. So how I would go about selecting the right anchor is I think about it logically. I want this shelf to be as strong as possible. I want the weight limit of my anchors to be as high as possible. But what you'll notice is the holes on this bracket aren't very big. So because of that, I'm somewhat limited in this large anchor department. These bolts won't fit through these holes. So right away, I know I can't use these, our favorite ones. Sorry, buddy. Oh, that was a disaster. It's fine, we'll clean that up later. I also can't use these flip toggle ones, which we also really like because the bolts are too big. That one wasn't so bad. But what you'll notice is, from the heavy department, these bolts, they fit perfectly, which means that this particular anchor is gonna work perfectly for this job. Basically, if you work that back, this anchor gives me the most load capacity with bolts that still fit. So that's what I'm gonna use for this project. And that's how I'm thinking about it. And so should you. So now that we've decided what anchor we're gonna use to hang our floating shelf, let's actually hang the shelf. I'll show you how I would do it. To do that, we're gonna use a few extra things. Just some tape measure, level and a pencil. Always good things to have. Follow me down here. Hello. If this were a real wall, I'd utilize the tape to make sure that I'm not putting pencil marks everywhere. But basically what we're gonna try to do is find the center of this wall so that I can center my floating shelf. So I know it's gonna be roughly around here somewhere. So I'm gonna just stick that piece of tape there. We're gonna assume that I'm hanging it approximately here. Then, I'm gonna find center, which I know from this wall, this is 48, so we're gonna go 24. I'm just gonna slide that tape here. And then I'm just gonna make a mark for center. For sake of argument, let's say I wanted a 36 from the ground here. I'll just make a little tick at 36. I've got my height and my center. Pretty cool. We're done. Just begun. So I'm gonna take my bracket, and remember, these are our studs, and this one's gonna go between the studs. What? That's right, because we're using the right anchors. That's what this video is about. I'm gonna take my bracket, I'm gonna put that, there's a center hole on this, which is very helpful. So I know that's center, and I know that's where the top is gonna be. So I've got my center, and I've got my height. And now I just need to make sure that it's level before I mark my screw holes. So I'm gonna put a level on there. It's over here. Once I've got that where I like it, right about there, I'm gonna go ahead and mark my location for my anchors. That's how you have to mark things when you're on camera. It's not easy. Now this bracket calls for the outside 4 holes. They don't want one in the middle. They don't want one in the middle, so I'm not gonna do it. But you could do one there. Don't need this anymore. Thank you for your service. Got my heavy duty anchor. So a quick tip for you is, even though we're using a self-drilling anchor like this one, if I really need that anchor location to be accurate, I'm gonna pre-drill it with a drill bit rather than using this. Sometimes these can be a little bit wonky when you drill them in. So using a pre-drill to get that hole started can save you a lot of hassle and make sure that your anchor is exactly where you need it to be. So let's do that. Should probably be wearing goggles. Live dangerously. So now they're pre-drilled. Another good tip, always follow the package. A lot of these anchors will say not to use a drill, use a manual screwdriver. So it may be slower, may be old school, but we're gonna follow the rules. I might switch to a drill later. Shh. No. Oh, the control of the manual screwdriver at work. I got another tip for you. See all this debris here? Sometimes that can keep your anchor from sitting flat against the wall. So what I'll do is back it out, and then I'm gonna clear this debris before I sink that fully. Just switch to a flathead screwdriver here. So just get rid of this before you sink your anchor. Okay, now I'm back, and I'm gonna sink it all the way. We're gonna do that. 1, 2, 3 more times. 3 more times. Carry the one. I'm a bad boy. See, I finished with the manual one. It's not nothing. Ready for a shelf. We're anchored up. I'm gonna get rid of our stud arrows. Classic building terms, stud arrows, other leg arrows. Dust off your brackets. Let's see how we did. Oh, alignment's looking good. Get a few of them started. I'm gonna switch to the old Okay, now before it gets too tight, this is a good chance to get your level out one final time and make sure that it's sitting where you want it. Perfect. We like perfection. We always have. Always will. Now let's finish with the hand screwdriver. Make sure it's nice and snug. This is why it's important to know how your anchors work. Because if I didn't really know, I'd be spinning that and thinking that it wasn't working, when in reality, it just needs to get a little further, a little closer to the wall, and then it's gonna bite like crazy. Come on, bite! Boy, that's strong. But I knew that, and so should you have. Okay, moment of truth, floating shelf. Take one. Oh, it's perfect. All right, the shelf is installed. But what's the best way to test the strength of a floating shelf? The old guest at the party trick. No way. How interesting. What's that? Where are you? I'll be right there after I... Sorry about that bit. That was really cringy. Okay, there we go. The shelf is hung, and now you know how to hang a shelf. In fact, you know how to hang basically anything, whether you have access to a stud or not. Because now you know how anchors work, and you know which anchors to use, thanks to us. So now you could basically do what we do. You could even make a video about it. You could get yourself one of these. It's hard work though, so be warned. Till next time, see you later, YouTube. A big thank you to RONA for sponsoring this tutorial and supporting creators like us. Remember, for all your home improvement needs, from tools and supplies to expert guidance, RONA is your one-stop shop. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next project. How'd that get there? Never seen that before in my life. You can buy that apparently. Apparently those are only $90.